Post-Cybernetic Judicial War by David Cole, from CCRU's Abstract Culture Swarm No. 2. This text from CCRU.net. His kneecap resonates with a tin rounded sound. The hammer strikes a center. A dent belongs to the event. Puckered metal forms a landscape within. Scars of slashed steel are left by the indentation of a heavy, thumping device. Magic emperors appear. They are lit from behind. They are circled in an arc, organized around carousel decoration, English Art Deco figureheads which are filled in with the representations of detailed botanical paintings. The use of myth, Buddhist kings. Such binder gods chime pleasantly when they are lit. They can see you, being covenant-enhanced and resounding. For example, Lochi and his lamp, Radha with her dance, Arthurian legend, the one-eyed monster directing from a clearing. The animals gathered kiss the ground and become grass. The arc is woven with symbol and refrain, vulgar music, the clatter of mechanism as its appeal is telegraphed, transformed, and transmitted. The half-circled regalia of the stance pictures an horrific progression. You must play the game. The figures are lit from the back. They shine. It is hard to escape their gaze. Below the magic emperors are the more complex regimes of pattern and belief. They take hold of the players, not wrapped with the power of the look. They are never fully lit up. They never totally confront you with your fear, but define pathways and webs of connection that lead onto different levels. They are a complicated mass of socio-historic signs and signifiers, entirely jumbled into abstract symbolism and logical distinction. Planes of color, diagonal and axial crosses, digital codes, heraldry, stars, pentacles, circles, and squares. This confusion of relative power relations manifests themselves as the legitimized ornaments of government. Chamfort, Goering, Lord Palmerston, Henry Kissinger. These are the manipulators of the knot. They appear on the letterhead. They take bites out of logos. They make feasts with one-armed bandits. They laugh as the coins fall from the sky. Fully encased in metal, another ball bearing fires. It flies into the chaos of combat. War, mutilated body parts, triggered islands of information. The mechanical noises accumulate your score. It roams over centuries half buried, then surfaces at an instant of opposition, silence and revenge. It is a genetic algorithm of detailed psychosis, which is written by a shuffling, anonymous attendant. You are placed on the operating table. He implants you with your score. You are ready to continue, able to make another play. The ball passes through the gap. The violence is evacuated. The gods light up. The symbols and signs direct the process to the next phase. Here, money and their markets, the individual and game theory, all exist in various states of equilibrium. No longer playing, but being played. No longer spending, but being spent. The thresholds are subtle. The diversions extreme, unrelenting. Competitive equilibrium is non-personal. The theory of the core dictates markets, which depend on individual actions. Core analysis is the determination of a set of possible outcomes. These outcomes are compatible with their dealers. Competition is not regulated from the outside. Price stability must be actively pursued if it is to affect the market. Dealers and traders participate in this regulation themselves. Money is assumed, values transitive, fluid, metal poured through open chutes. Core theory solves problems involving increased returns, indivisibilities, lump-funded projects. The collision of active interest capacity forces imputations into the core. The markets are traced within closer and tighter circuits. Trading tackles new limits of multi-unitary dimension. Relations between traders and dealers are here complex convex works. Such convexity has the implication of sealing off the relations between markets into sets which satisfy core constraints. Non-empty cores are therefore necessary to address game models and market forces. Common unit values have to be pursued. These values are potentially proactive and independent. Money can be set up on its own. Information is expensive. Market participants limit their contacts depending on the number of information sources which are available. Information directs the speed of the market. Substitution allows the participants to be involved in the market for the longest possible period. With substitution, the information needed to secure contact between participants is at its lowest cost. Products may then be transferred in their constituent units. Trade becomes predictable. The Cournot-Nash theory supplies a framework for determining the relationship between collusion and competition. Under these conditions, market forces are stabilized. The predictability of substituted trade transfers to legal restraint. Black markets are dominated and subsumed. Thus, information acts in a bipodal fashion with respect to trade. It encourages substitution, and it develops different strata of relations, those legislated and those beyond the law. In the net landscape of information dispersal, the trade relations may be simultaneously delegislated and unsubstituted. The next game expands beyond the cybernetic interactions of trade. It engulfs a continent, the Indian Peninsula. The conflict between the superpowers has left a deep rift in the organization of society. The modern equivalent of Athens and Sparta fighting over history. The gulf between land and city defines a zone of interaction which has the potential to become affected by innovation and the organization of flows of capital. Indian social structures are ready to be swept into this interaction, reorganized and reestablished in different phases. Out of phase, demonic and creative, the caste system defines new ways of looking at social structure. The myths of the Hindu, lit up from behind, arced onto the platinum dashboard of technological innovation, and combined with the patterns and signs of Manu belief, together foretell a liberalized future of city life. Bangalore defines the state. It is a state which Heidegger could not have conceived of. It is a state which amphetamine sulfate will not take you close to. Bangalore is a postmodern opiate, an offshoot from the vision of Ridley Scott. The Edge of War, cyberspace. Stanislav Andreevsky looks at the issue of social change in terms of biotaxi. Biotaxi is a settlement of argument through force. No society is completely devoid of biotaxi. Through its placement at the backdrop for the assessment of social matters, many of the false oppositions in society may be removed. War is not opposite to peace. Love has nothing to do with hate. All are forces. An expression presupposes the setting of biotaxi. Gandhi and Nehru, in the formal expression of peace, were defining a methodology for dealing with imminent thermonuclear attack. The UN, with its global crusade to maintain the status quo, are preparing us for cyberspace. War on the internet is imminent. It has no precursors. It has no goals. It will not cause any territories to fall other than its own. This collapses the integration of technology with biology, the fusion of metal and flesh, the intensity of the flame with the atom. Deleuze and Guattari explore these factors through an examination of isomorphy. Capital can be mobilized to render projects, such as communication with extraterrestrials, as operative. Thus, flows of monies open up the edge of further territorial gains. This is axiomatic, to the extent that decoded flows may be thought of in terms of imminent models of realization. Such isomorphy accommodates itself with the greatest of formal differences, encompassing polymorphic models, and political problems in the organization of a state. In the climate of information technology, the axiomatic and models of realization are continually crossing over each in communication. Social subjectification proportions itself to the model of realization. Machinic enslavement expands to meet the dimensions of the axiomatic that are effectuated in the model. In the example of television, the viewer is enslaved as a human machine, insofar as they are no longer consumers or users or subjects, but are intrinsic component parts, input and output, feedback, recurrences which are no longer connected to the machine in such a way as to produce it. In the orientation of game theory, strategies vary from zero-sum to non-zero-sum. Social choices are viewed as being on a continuum, from pure coordination through mixed motive to pure conflict games. Since most social choices can be affected only if coalitions are formed, the process of coalition formation must be theorized if the mechanisms of social choice are to be understood. A minimum resource theory will emphasize the initial resources to effect a decision which the players bring to the situation, rather than their strategic bargaining position. The minimum power theory acts in a similar way to the minimum resource theory, making use of coefficients to state that participants will demand a share of the payoff proportional to their pivotal power. The pivotal power hypothesis defines the power of the winning coalition. Anti-competitive hypotheses are useful to define the cohesion of social groups, but tend to materialize norms by which social behavior may be placed against. Utter confusion theory, where political coalitions emerge from complete bedlam, is best theorized by the use of random choice process, where coincidence may be written into the machinic operation of the formula. India's main adversary has been Pakistan. The development of its nuclear capacity has been a closely debated race between the two nations. Domestic nuclear power, the threat of attack from the superpowers and China, have added impetus to the necessity for splitting the atom. Both now possess the ability to launch nuclear attack. The climate of suspicion has given way to the unease of nuclear stalemate. Economic development in India will encourage the expansion of foreign policy, yet the capital required to shift the core zones of Tokyo, Singapore, or Hong Kong to Bangalore will only be achieved via the acceleration inherent within information dispersal. The substantial Indian meshwork was written to the post-British India withdrawal. It was a product of the conflict between neighbors and the socio-economic region, and the restructured relationship between village and town. The anti-market is in place to the extent that the non-competitive elements have been set into society by the codes of religion, the self-organization of the rural, and the abundant entrepreneurial expertise. The last component necessary for the development of microeconomic relationship reversals is the internet or directed information, the reality of information dispersal, Asia as the producer, Europe as the market. The feedback processes shall increase up until a bifurcation point, at which the socioeconomic flows shall be considered to be invariant. Asia will then be the core. Europe and America will turn around it, feeding off the dual axioms of violence and leisure. Religion has played a pivotal role in the regulation of violence between city and the land. The rule of the priests, not being centrally governed, has dictated the sedimentation of social spheres into their component parts. This has been called stratification. Yet as real-time is subsumed beneath economic acceleration, the sediment will be dissolved. They will go to make a figure as such, becoming lava. This precipitates a reorganization of Indian society on the grounds of economic microunits. Through bypassing governmental regulation, and with the biataxic conditions of polarity, relativized into webworks of information loss and retrieval. The product assimilation of peasant aggregates is not Marxian in the establishment of harmonized power structures, dealing fluidly with control mechanisms, convergent points becoming pivotal in the matrix. It will instead lead to the war zone being translated onto the net. Harmonization is not a factor in the determination of the redistribution of wealth. The cyclic process of product level versus dispersal rate defines the way in which global wealth shall be rationalized into noticeable reversals of international economic market forces. This has also been looked at in terms of saturation. It could be falsely claimed that the saturation of a system marks its point of inversion. Yet saturation itself is relative. The axiomatization of capital flows defines an immanent system of laws. This system continually confronts its own laws as the motive for market renewal. In the nuclear industry, the laws which are continually confronted are the laws of energy dispersal, which are tending to become gridded in ever-increasing complex networks, depending on the available saturation points within the system. These points are the focal markers of grid complexification, known as attractors of phase movement, in the stage directions for social change. In terms of electronic media, the saturation points are the convergent elements of socioeconomic organization. They are the profit centers of information and distributed molecular models of realization. The continual adjustment of the axioms of market forces results in struggles for the enunciation of principle and the tension in the state. Large corporations, state benefactors, military pressure groups are the liquidating factors in the rural field of immanence. There is a fundamental difference between the living flows and the axioms which subordinate themselves to centers of control and decision-making. The latter act in order to produce a given geographical segment, corresponding to their axioms, which they then measure in quanta. Living flows do not orientate themselves in a centrally locatable formation of technocratic hierarchy. They are the moving parts of the relationships between status and order, the cyclones and the precipitation. These base units or cells are the exigent matters in the affairs of the state. BSE, or the reorganization of Soviet farming economies, show that the proliferation of state legislation in a rural setting makes the hierarchical relationship between city and the land fragile and brittle. If market forces are to be in phase with living axioms, state legislation has to be bypassed. Singularities must be followed. The sword has to be cast in the forge. States are isomorphic. They encourage the homogenization of capital in an external world market. They also promote the existence of a single integrated domestic market, as is happening in Europe. The isomorphy of the models of production of the state depends upon how the domestic and foreign markets are distributed. This isomorphy is not homogeneous as such, but collects axioms into unities or rights. These consistencies are divided by capital into segments, which span modes of production and the political hierarchies which grow around them. The parasitical functionalism of the socialist states, which has been framed as virus creative, is the model of market realization, which by and large has been used in the Third World. The existence of a single external world market determines the plane of capital which is to be extracted from the emergent state organization of the parasitic and the viral. This is by no means the old-style relationship of dependency and gain, which hail from the colonial empires, and is particularly pertinent in the example of India. The tyranny of tea and opium has given way to a capital relationship, one which may be manipulated from either end of the transfer of resource, money, or skills. This is a polymorphic situation, and one in which the axiomatics of India will not necessarily be absorbed into core markets at the center. Polymorphism constitutes beneficial conditions by which information dispersal may be achieved. The net will be wrenched from the nerd monopoly, which seeks to isolate certain functioning capacities in the endgame strategies of accumulative choice. These paradigms are programmed by the Western ideals of democracy, freedom, and enlightenment teaching. These are weak and unstable in relation to the Eastern social movements of multicellular yet combined axiomatic dispersal. Japan was a beginning. The forecast-specific rim trading figures are a smokescreen. The real action starts to take place when the polymorphism of the viral creative is translated into trade relations which reflect the substantial productive capacities of the rhizomatic, that is, shifting circuits of energy interaction, where the innovative and technological are injected into the living body of axiomatic production, products of the transitive and valueless ornaments of a world trade situation, in which the benefactors are in the process of becoming irrelevant. Their subsidence into the organic is a translation of a code which began in the 15th century. DNA is the last gasp of Western science. The decoding of the double helix is the model of realization for the Enlightenment ideal of discovering the secrets of nature. This fantasy has economic and social concomitant effects. The economic realities of the biotechnology, which has evolved around the search for DNA strands, has pushed the socio-scientific community to new levels of integration. Yet these levels are not matched by the flows of capital into the development of socio-economic conditions to sustain the search at its optimal level of speed. Instead, the technology is fully transferable to other locations with lower levels of production cost and more integrated communities, where ideal time direction may be situated in a consistent and stable strata. With the circumvention of central capital accumulation, the escape from the regulation and bureaucracy, and the development of socius interaction without the necessity of defense mechanisms inhibiting viral creation, the communal scientific prerogative of the West will be reversed. This shall be a relative reversal, corresponding to capital saturation points, and the phase stages involved with social movement. The Brahmin as nomads. Lines of flight described as east-west pivots. The Aryan invaders used their metallurgic skill to innovate beyond the levels of their sedentary adversaries. The laws of Manu, the myths of the Hindu, are the overcoated fragments of war, implanted in a relationship with the land, needed to establish a domain between rival city-states. The land watched on in bewilderment as the warring factions proceeded to destroy one another. This destruction has been arrested by the advent of the nuclear age. War on the extrinsic scale is impossible. The state system, left by the British, consolidated by the Gandhi elite, and ignored by the majority, is in an isomorphic process of implosion. The remnants of the previous relationship between the urban and the rural is in the process of reestablishing a trade network on all levels of stratified Indian life. This network is not a simple meshwork of interlocking elements, ready to trade at any cost, but requires a permutation of possible dispersal mechanisms to be experimented with. The necessary capital flows must not be exceeded by the hierarchical reintegration of unsubstantive status and the establishment. The Brahmin are a key element in this network realization. Unlike the Christian West, the Brahmin do not straightforwardly suffer from effete moral debilitation. The quandary and oscillation between good and evil is not a consideration. The life-draining focus on the weak is not as such a problem. The Brahmin reflect the multifarious relationship between land and city. Theirs is a social code, and one which may be coherently transferred into a productive synthesis in an information environment. They shall be the organizers of Bangalore. They will be the fighters in the war on the net. You twitch on the table. A metallic pain is thumping through your head. A faint techno-Indian tune stimulates the memory to olfactory delight. Dancing, bright colors, the sensual feel of a ceremony. Perhaps Kali has been painting the world. It seems to be full of life. The repetition of the same has been replaced by the taste of a web. Female warriors, by the delicious scent of the kill permeating your mind. Yet it isn't real. It's another perverse illusion. Another digital piece of make-believe. You vibrate between two realities. The awakened Asian, the deadened European. Yet the choice is not so stark. One does not feed off the other. The relationship has been already established. It has already been played through. A different god on the ark lights up. Its gaze takes your fear away. It makes you believe in your fate. The decoration, the clatter of mechanical sound takes away some of the pain. The patterns and signs of belief signal diversions. They are wrapped up, presented on the table as metal interactions accelerate between them. They become speed, explode and disappear in the chiming reverberations of the score. The score is decoded by the attendant. He lurches away, deliberately, awkwardly. Then you realize, the score, he has a score. What is he going to do with it? Where is he taking it? Why do you have to keep playing this ridiculous game? Another ball bearing fires. It flies off into the chaos of war. Combat, mutilated body parts, triggered islands of information.